Hello, I'm trusting that we're live. And I'm just going to start talking. We have been working, this is our fourth video, and we've been working really hard to get this functioning properly. So I'm trusting that today we're there. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great, surprisingly great, considering the last 24 hours. Big repair job in my house this morning. And so we'll just see where it goes as we head into this topic. I did mention last time I was going to be talking about prepping, but really setting is what came next when I was first putting together this series, and I decided to go back to that original leading. This is number 4 in a series of 6 where I am responding to a request and sharing the adventure that God has me on. Oh, if you don't know me, I'm Sandra Allen Lovelace. I am a coach, a speaker, an author. And this adventure is about God moving me away from the overwhelm that wants to press into my life and into the life of peace that he actually has planned for me. So in that process, what I'm doing is I am rediscovering and reclaiming my Ephesians 2:10 design and purpose. Now, in this process, I decided to invite my friend Michelle to join me for a couple of reasons. One, because it was nice to have a friend here. Thank you, Michelle. But also because in a way, we're sharing this adventure, this journey. And probably the differences would add up to be the same as the similarities, but welcome to being part of this conversation, Michelle.
Thank you.
Great to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Good. Okay, so last time when we were talking, the tip that I shared was about how important it is to know yourself, the core of who you are on the inside, and how we react. I'll go ahead and use that word. We might just think about responding and time and all that, but how we react on the inside to the kinds of things that are happening on the outside of our lives. And trauma actually pushes us into the God-given smarts and strength and adaptability that's built into us. That all gets, I'll say, developed, but put to work when we have trauma in our lives, whether it's long-term trauma or whether it's short-term, whether it's big trauma or whether it's little trauma, just too much too fast or too little for too long. Now, all of us have experienced trauma now, if never before, in the last couple of years with all this virus stuff and the incredible changes and speedy ones that are happening in the world around us. But I want to suggest that the PTSD that probably is impacting everybody, I'll be brave, I'll say everybody, the PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And last time I redefined that into PTSS, post-traumatic survival skills, that the smarts that God gave us and the strength that had to be put in place and the adaptability that was required has all been growing through the struggles, and which is just the way it works. And now we can put it to use in our lives today. And that awareness, that understanding actually fits right into where we're going today. Because today, I want to talk about setting. And for meals, yes, so let's apply it right now. I just want to talk about setting the table, setting the table. And another reason for that is because I realized when I was making that original list about these 6 topics Setting came next because I learned before I even did the food prep for a meal that it behooved me, it benefited me. It was a blessing to actually go and set the table first, to pause and set the environment that the meal would be served into. Now, that might sound a little odd, like there's so much else to do. Why would you stop and do that first? Well, because I learned that in the 2 years that I spent on staff at La Brie in Switzerland back in the 1970s, when the Schaefers were still there. And the community was really actively pursuing their lifestyle, the format and framework that they had set. It's changed today, but that was how it was back then. So to pause, for me, to pause and think about, following Edith Schaefer's idea and the way the community ran, how did I want the meal to go? Well, I did want a calm environment. I wanted it to be comfortable when people came in without a lot of distractions. And yes, I would put down a centerpiece to be a focal point for the meal. And always, there were candles on the table. Now, in those days, there were so many people at the table that I did use paper napkins, but that's not really the way to go. And so today I would use cloth napkins. And I would actually walk through the meal. I would know ahead of time how many students would be coming to sit at the table. And at the first little place, Chalet Nicole, where I was first serving meals, there could only be maybe 4 or 6 students because it was a very small space that had been rehabbed out of a portion of a barn, cow barn. But then I moved to Chalet Bethany, and I could have 16 people. And sometimes even on a Saturday night when there was an influx, I would have 20 or so people. We didn't sit around the table in those days, but we would have people collected on the floor with a table on the side like a buffet in those days. But you could see that the variety of the people that I was going to serve, and that would also affect how I served the meal. But all of that needed to come into play. And yes, it made more sense to do that before the prep so that I had my calmness in place. Now, that was a special time when there were groups of people. And there was a time, there wasn't a bell that rang and we had to start at a certain time, but we did need to start and end. The breakfast and lunch would be generally places students had to go, but evening meal could, except for the nights when Schaefer was there, Thursday nights when he spoke, we didn't have to worry too much about closing time. And we might even, I remember the night that we had conversation around the table until all the candles sputtered down to the bottom, brand new candles that were gone. But really after that couple of years, then off to seminary and family. Firstborn was born there. And then seminary, where yes, we still did have guests, but it was a family time. And I think I mentioned in another video about wanting to teach my daughters, I have 2 daughters, about the same thing, about running a household. And it's not just about buying groceries and throwing food on a table. There's a whole a lot more to consider when you're doing that. And so I wasn't just teaching about place settings, although that was important too. I was not trained in those kinds of things, and I didn't know what was the little fork for, what about the big fork, and what did it matter, and the spoon and the knives and so on. I didn't do that every time, but I did make sure that within a year's time, we would do that on special occasions, maybe birthdays, so that everything was laid to the full opulence of what we had. And let's see, checking my notes. Yes, how to set the table, if I wanted to have a tablecloth or not. Centerpieces, as I mentioned. And literally in my mind, I would walk through the mealtime and what I was hoping. So for those days, it was about family, but then it could also have been inviting a group in or another couple in. Might be a special event, again, where there would be a celebration, and that would be a different setup. So it was important for me to separate my inner world from everything that was going on around me, and might have been pushing me to say, wait a minute now, what are we wanting to accomplish this evening? How is this all going to work? Now, at La Brie, learn pretty quickly. Once you've got this routine down, then you can respond and get your helpers to do various tasks and go about the process pretty efficiently. And with family, the same thing happened. But when changes come up, a different group or whatever, it was more important, especially important for me to pause and go and consider those things. And yes, these days I always use, well, unless it's a large group, I use cloth napkins these days, but also include candles. So this is what I learned in terms of the setting table skills. First of all, pause and figure out who's going to be there, what's the setting going to be. And then I could get into a pattern of those kinds of presentations and pass those things on to my daughters. And then if there's a group or help, how to be able to, and that's how I incorporated my daughters slowly in the process. So it's really a big advantage or a big retraining it was, and even now, because now I'm on my own. And if you haven't heard it yet, you might want to go back and listen to that video number 1, where I tell the story about how I started to pay attention. Remember that one, Michelle? Yeah. So really the atmosphere and the tone of the mealtime and the evening and so on, and it was very good for me in terms of self-direction. It has been really helpful to, again, pause about what's going on the outside, pause all of that, and consider what's going on the inside, and project that into the future about how to arrange things for calmness for the desired result over the mealtime conversation. So now I want to, I'm going to carry on, but Michelle, where are you in that process?
Fascinating, because with 3 kids, I feel like I'm constantly jumping up and down and grabbing more food for them, or I forgot to get the napkins, let me grab some napkins. And so, and I can see how having a candle on the table would bring a lot of like peace and calm. So that's a great idea to incorporate. Okay. But I need to do some of this. It's great. Thank you.
Great. Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I still do it for myself, and whether or not, this whole series is really coming out of the fact that I do put most of my meals up on Facebook. And even now, if I've decided today it's too hectic, or this is something else is going on and I'm not going to take a photo today, which happens occasionally, it's okay. I still arrange the fruit in a way so I like it, and make sure that so and so on is where I like it. It's not picky like an obsession, but it helps me to calm my body. And I almost always will light the candle too. So that's it. Now, I want to share another piece of my life besides the La Brie experience that fits into this topic. Because the idea of pausing to make sure of what's going on the outside and what's happening on the inside is, well, something I share with my clients all the time. Pause. But it happened to me last year, May 2021. God just said to me, basically, step back. I was on my way to church that morning, and he just said, step back. God, step back. I don't know what you mean by that. And he pulled me slowly out of one thing and another. And it was an opportunity to do the same thing, not just in terms of setting a table and planning an evening or a morning or lunch, whatever, but also it can have to do with our whole lives. And in some ways, I'm still there because I'm following God's lead in what his plan is for me. Now, that's really different because I used to be sure of what was next and where I was going and so on, so on, so on. I used to have all kinds of future plans, but now it's dramatically different. Each day is a day unto itself. Today was very different than what I thought. I remembered that this is 1 o'clock and I have a haircut appointment at 2 o'clock. And the air conditioning guy who had a several-hour project to do, he also decided Wednesday morning was the proper time to do that project. And so I had him and his helper in here right away early this morning. So in terms of refining and highlighting and being prepared and all of that, I have been pushed today. And facing that, I have to say that I'm thankful for this particular lesson, this particular tip that I'm sharing with you, because I kept looking ahead through the morning and saying, okay, I'm not going to be able to sit and concentrate on going through my notes until after they're gone. Lord, please. And I prayed like mad, please let them be gone as soon as possible. But I can do this and I can get that done. And I'm not going to shower and prepare that while the guys are in the house either. So I'm going to be putting that off until later. And I had a really draining day yesterday, and my body was not in a mood to be hyper. And so I was very aware of what was going on the inside and just let my nervous system rest. There you go. Now there's a cutting edge comment about the work that God is doing in my life, about facing the overwhelm and keeping it out and maintaining peace on the inside. We've talked about the balance dial that I brought up before, and here it is again. That's where I was choosing to live in peace this morning. And then I knew as the guys came for the project, the pressure was to go up here to stress. And it felt very strange, honestly. It felt very strange to know that I had this in front of me and I needed to step back and maintain my peace. But I kept taking deep breaths and changing my scenery, doing little things here or there that I could to keep it down, not to go into stress, and definitely not to allow the PTSD level to be hitting up here in survival mode. I'm thankful, very, very thankful. I know that Jesus was beside me from the very beginning of my life all the way through. And the survival skills came in not more than handy, they were necessary, but I want to put them to work here. And that's where this creativity and calm and confidence and compassion and all the other C words that I'm not remembering at the minute come into play. So that's where I am now. The tip for today then is to make time. Have you ever noticed that you can't find time? It's never just lying around to pick up and say, oh, I'm going to breathe through this right now because this time just came to me. Rather, we have to pause before struggles. We have to make time to pause, check our nervous system, what's going on the inside, or there's this thing coming up. Probably once we know ourselves from the tip from last time, once we know ourselves, we can project, oh yes, in this kind of a setting, I know how I'm going to feel. And so pausing, figuring out those things and considering, and I don't want to make it sound like it's a simple human response to our environment, but rather knowing what I know about myself. I want to take time to spend time with God, to do the things that I know for my body, the breathing, the change in scenery, the calming practices that I know, and be with the Lord in prayer. Just as I was saying, I meant to say this earlier, but I think I missed it. The whole idea of remembering to work in PTSS, or to rest it, actually work ourselves away from the PTSD to PTSS, where we're not driven. Instead, we are devoted. And I would also like to say in there too, it's let's see, dependent on God. So that's another D one there. Also from work, switching over to worship. And I'm also going to add in worry instead of worry to switch over to worship, but also the pressure and the ideas about performance, and switch that all over to peace, the peace mode on our balance dial. And to be there, I thought of a couple of scriptures actually came to mind. And the first one is from Proverbs 3. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, rely on him and he will make your paths straight. Look it up in your translation, whatever that is, but it's Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. But another one that came to mind that actually rose up above that one is Psalm 27. And I was so glad when I went and looked it up, because Psalm 27, verse 14, wait for the Lord. And I love this next line. Be strong and let your heart take courage from the Lord. Yes, wait for the Lord. So that's my tip for today. All right, Michelle, you're here, you're hearing it now. What's your response?
I have never set the table before preparing any kind of meal. Typically, no. But I do see the value in it. And I see how we can compare that to what you're talking about. And before we jump straight into another big task, to take time to check your setting, check your heart before you dive in and do all this stuff. So what happens with me is I make the meal, I'm doing all the prep work, and then I have to think, where are the plates? Are we going to make our plates here? We're going to sit. So this is very valuable to me. I'll be trying this new concept of setting the table first and then doing the preparation. It's great.
Thank you. Say that again.
And candles. I like
Oh,
that.
yes. It's really funny. In one of the other groups that I'm in, I mentioned that I have candles on my table, and a number of other women hopped in and said, oh yes, candles, I'll do that too. Thank you for adding that. I appreciate it. I always benefit from your insights too. Yes. Isn't it interesting how the skills that God gives us and builds into our lives, even with this kind of a practice, right, can be applied to other parts in our lives? Before I think I'm going to pause and wait on the Lord for him to prepare me for that particular task or environment that I'm going into. And it's a note to me too. I need to be doing that more widely. I'm really glad you're here, Michelle. Thanks. So if any of you have anything to add, you can write a comment or a question in the boxes below. And especially if you have somebody else that you think in a nice way could maybe benefit from this insight, these insights and this input, please share the video with them. I notice these days that Facebook is lots of ads and other kinds of things that are breaking in, but this is really a personal message to my friends and other women that might possibly feel a little bit of pressure from overwhelm and be interested about some tips to be able to nurture peace in their lives, because we women certainly can use a lot of that. Yeah. Thanks again, Michelle. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.